But today we're going to be talking about poop.
Poop.
We're just going to be talking about poop. That's all I can tell you right now. So, how's everybody else doing today? Let's see. We've got the fearsome, dynamic female organization of Keller Williams. Oh, there comes Dan. He finally made it. Glad to see that. Robert's there. All right. We got a few people here. That's good. So, how many people have had to do a septic inspection? Give me a show of hand. I see Danny has to. Okay. Anybody else? Let's see who's else out there. Sandy has. Okay. I guess
Yes.
Robert has. Okay. Pam, I know Pam Woolley's done a few septics in her life. Aren't they fun? I mean, the very first septic, I always like giving you guys a little war story, as you guys know. The very first septic that I ever had to do was a relative of mine. He was my godfather, my padrino, and he had passed away. So the family wanted to sell the house. And it was up there in Nambe, north of Santa Fe, past Pewaukee. Nice little house. And he was a contractor. So that was always kind of fun, digging through his kind of products. And in those days, everybody just kind of did a septic. And they started off as maybe a cesspool originally. And we'll get to that definition. But basically what it means is it's a holding tank with no cover on it. And, you know, they just put a piece of plywood and maybe some tin on it, the whole bit. So sure enough, my uncle, who was a contractor, was a little bit ahead of the times and had a septic put in his house. And it was on the right where the driveway is. So they'd drive up on top of it, but it was all cement and concrete. And he was a concrete guy. And then the leach field kind of ran in the back of the house. So being very green and the whole bit, not knowing this, talked to the cousin, says, yeah, Dad has a septic back there. So sure enough, we got back there and there was a big old metal, kind of like a manhole cover. It wasn't that cool, but it covered it and it was safe. So when the kids would play, and I remember playing on top of it as a little kid. So the septic guy, as you know, they're going to pump it out. And we had made all the arrangements with the state of New Mexico to come and check it out, that make it was working in the whole bit. And I'll never forget, first time out, septic guys unlit it. And of course, you know, you kind of back off from the smell. And that thing was full, right? Almost to the lid where we had just taken off. And oh my God. I said, I'm in so much trouble. The guy said, no. He says, it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's holding the waste and it's holding the liquid waste. I would be a lot more nervous if indeed they would have taken that lid off and it was dry to the bone. Why? Because that means that everything has flushed out. But I was a little concerned because it was like, wait a minute, where's all this stuff running to? Catherine, we're taking a class right now. Where's all this stuff going if it's full? And if you will look at a little bit on how a septic works, you basically have an inlet and an outlet, okay? And so the inlet is at the very bottom, naturally, where all the wastewater is coming in and all the poop. It's not right at the bottom, it's a little above. And then about maybe a quarter way from the top, there's an outlet. And that outlet, basically, it kind of looks like this. That outlet is the overflow for, of course, the liquid that goes into the septic line. Okay, all that line, all the wastewater itself. But of course, the solids stay down and keep dropping. But at some point, they have to be cleaned out. Well, to make a long story short, that thing had gone all the way to the top and it was kind of clogging, all the waste had clogged it. So to make a long story short, they cleaned it out, but it passed. It passed. And so that was, oh man, I don't know, 25 years ago, maybe that happened to me. And since then, I got more and more involved with with houses that had septics. And I would think, and I may be a little off of my math, maybe you remember, Pam, but it was maybe, I want to say 5 years ago, 7 years ago, maybe not that long ago, that we brokers then got involved with making sure that we were policing the septics. Okay. And before, we really didn't have to worry about it too much. It was somebody else's problem. And I remember even going to the legislature here, it must have been a number of years back, protesting with the other brokers that we didn't want to be in charge of septics. We had enough problems. I've changed my attitude a lot because I realized that there wouldn't be enough money in the state of New Mexico's budget to hire the number of people that would need to be inspectors for septics, because there are septics all over this state of New Mexico. And as somebody calls them, they're the little straws all over the state that has poop. And we also know that there have been the illegal cesspools that people haven't taken care of. And the worst thing is that some of these septics were put near wells. So that's a problem, because those nitrates and all those icky things that we get rid of is right next to have perhaps a well that people are drinking water from. So if you put that all kind of into place, you can see that's why this thing has fallen into our lap, per se. So question becomes, where do I even go in the first place to find information about septics? So let me see if I can get to this first one here for you guys.
Tom, while you're looking, are you guys looking up your own? I know it's kind of transpired, and dude, it's been like 10, 15 years we've been doing this. You must be having more fun at it, and because it doesn't seem as long. And I am going to say that when you get a for sale by owner and stuff, they were avoiding us because they said those realtors are costing us money. And if we do it for sale by owner, we don't have to get this septic stuff done. So that when we started being the police, it was kind of hard, but we've all adjusted. There are, and he'll probably go into this, some of them that are certified and that kind of stuff. But it was a real challenge when you do it for sale by owner and somebody buys it for sale by owner, and then you go sell that property and they go, well, we didn't do this when we bought. Yeah, because you didn't use a realtor, and you now we don't even know what you own under that underground. So, it's a lot of responsibility on us. But like I said, we're here to protect our groundwater, and that's what it's all about.
It really is. And yeah, we're still seeing it, Pam. We still have a lot of people who kind of want to work around. I've had brokers calling me, and we'll get a little into the conversation about, well, who pays for cleaning it? And, where you will see in the law, we'll talk to you a little bit about, we'll go over it here in a little bit about, it's whoever owns the property. So in a case like a for sale by owner, if they didn't take care of it, well, guess what? You just inherited that mess if you're the buyer. So first place I want to always kind of show you guys is, everybody's been giggling a little bit at me because I keep saying GTS, Google that stuff. So in this case, you can really use the SH word and GTS it right here to the New Mexico Environmental Department. It's online. Everything and anything you ever wanted to know about septics is right here. And so that's the env.nm.gov. And you can go right to it and you'll see right up here, it says waste. That's where you're going to start, waste management. And you can see if you scroll down, there's all solid waste, hazardous waste, wastewater. That's pretty much where you're going to start, or the liquid waste septic systems right there. So I'm not going to go through ad nauseum, but I really recommend that everybody review this page, because within it, you'll be able to find forms that you need, technical things, people that your clients are going to be asking you about, and as Pam was saying earlier, I can't tell you how many situations that I've run into that the people never went down with their deed and says, I now own the septic, it's been cleaned. And you should do that. And you should tell your people that, that once the house is closed and the septic has been approved and stamped, go down and say, hey, here's my deed. I'm now the legal owner of that. And the reason is because when you're ready to sell it again, and oh my God, you can't remember the name of the seller, it's going to be in his name. And I have had situation of done research of houses that have sold 4 or 5 times, that you go all the way back and you're doing all kinds of information because you're trying to find out who these people are.
Well,
Okay?
Tom, elaborate on that just a little bit more, because that is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard of. They record these permits or keep them according to the seller's name, not an address that doesn't ever change, not an address. So it is, when you're digging on your own, a lot of our septic companies go ahead and do this for us now. But when you're digging on your own, it's not linked to a property. It's linked to a property owner.
Right. And you can actually go in here. I was going to show you this, and you can actually, that's what the form looks like. You can actually search in here, permits and license. I'll have to look a little closer. But if you play in here, you can actually search. But as Pam said, good luck in trying to search it with an address. They're getting better, but 9 times out of 10, it's by the name. So if I have a septic and I sold it to Pam, and Pam never changed it, or, to her name, then all of a sudden, let's say something happens to Pam and she sells it for sale by owner and she sells it to Alexa. And then all of a sudden you're looking for that permit and it's already 3 people back. You better know that chain of title, because that's the only way you're going to find it. So it's not a perfect science by any means.
Hey, Tom.
And that's where people get tripped up. Yeah.
So if you're in the process, you've got a buyer who's buying a house that has a septic system on it. So it has to be, does it have to be recertified before the sale?
Yes.
So the environmental department has to recertify it, is that the right term?
Yes, that is correct. So let me get out of here for 1 second, because I always screw this up. And let me put this up. Boom, boom. And let me get back to you guys. And let me share this page. And here we go. We're going to talk about these things. And there's basically 2 forms that you should be working with. Most importantly, and this has been an ongoing conversation. I know everybody's in a hurry these days because they're going to get a new listing and so forth. And I get these calls all the time. Tom, what is the minimum amount that I need to have to do a new listing? And of course, we know we need the listing agreement, right? But I always try to convince you as brokers, get all of your documents for the listing ready to go. So if you're going to meet with that client one-on-one, say, you know what, it's going to take an hour today, but we're going to go through all this paperwork, and it's going to be a lot easier to be doing it now than it will be if the house goes under contract. And septics are one of those, particularly if you have that listing that has a septic there. Don't wait, because what will happen, and in particular in this market right now, what I see a lot of time, people basically get out their listing agreement, they go on waiver, they don't get all their paperwork done. They put it on the MLS because they have the listing agreement, and within 3 hours, they've got an offer. Now they're really backtracking, because now they've not only got to get all of their purchase agreements up to speed, they got to get all their listing agreements up to speed, because people are asking for things. So a word of advice, if you're taking a new listing, get your paperwork done all at one shot, get it signed all at one shot, upload it up to compliance all at one shot, get ahead of it, because if that agreement comes, that purchase agreement, and that guy's going to be looking for a septic thing. Oh man, I haven't done it. All right. So I always like to start off with the 2 forms, and a lot of people do not use the information sheet. They just go straight to the actual contingency sheet. But I tell people to use this, particularly when you're in septics, and particularly when you're brand new into this business, because here's what this thing says, and it goes to some of the questions you may have, Greg. New Mexico Association Realtor Information Sheet, Septic Systems. General information disclaimer. Right off the bat, I've highlighted, if the owner of a system is responsible for ensuring that the system on the property and excavation related to the system do not pose a public safety hazard and properly owned and maintaining the system in accordance with the government. The recommendation of manufacturers is furthermore, owners of the septic systems, let me get this out of the way. Let me get this. Furthermore, owners of the septic systems are subject to the liquid waste disposal and treatment regulation promulgated by the New Mexico Environmental Department. Under the New Mexico Environmental Department liquid waste disposal and treatment regulations, the term owner is defined as any person who owns a septic system or component thereof, or any lot on which any septic system or any component thereof is located. So right there, it says the owner. That's why so often when people say, well, I'm listening, who's responsible for it? I always tell you, the person who owns that property. The only time that it gets squirrely is if a person buys a property through a real estate contract, okay? The New Mexico Environmental Department considers the owner of the property to be the buyer. Why? Because a lot of times these for sale by owners is kind of like what Pam was talking about. Hey, I'm going to sell it for sale by owner. We don't even have to go to the environmental department, but they just bought the thing on a real estate contract. You know, do you think the owner took the time to say, let's get this thing pumped and see if it works? Probably not. Pam's smiling because she's probably been through that. Probably not. So the next thing is Pam says, oh, great. We love this house, but guess what? We're going to go ahead and sell it. And then they go to a realtor, as Pam was talking about. And the realtor says, hey, man, we got to get your septic pump. We got to see if it works. And lo and behold, it hasn't worked for years. There's a crack in the holding tank. The leach field is not working correctly, and they want to sell it. Well, they just probably bought themselves anywhere from a $6,000 to $10,000 problem, if it's a basic conventional one. So, hence the reason when you're taking a listing, you put that onus right back on the seller. You're going to have to get this done. If you want to sell this property, you're going to need to get it done and take care of it.
Tom, do you have them get it at listing time? You know, because it is so date sensitive, and well, in the market we are today, I would say get it done. But in a like an uneven market, like a buyer's market, and they're only good for 180 days, not 6 months. And if they're vacant, you can apply for an extension for up to a year.
That is correct.
But you know, so be careful. That's about a $650 to $1,000 fee here, no matter what, because there's a riser that's needed or a something that's needed. So I'm careful about not getting those too early that they're having to redo them.
And here's what Pam is talking about exactly. That the date. Let's say that you bought that you're listing this property in the month of May, and you don't get an offer on that house until the month of December. Okay, you've got to be careful of that 180 days. So you're going to push that out on your deadlines, okay, in your calendar. You're going to communicate to your seller, hey, seller, this is only good for 180 days. Let's not jump through the hoop of getting it cleaned tomorrow. But when we go under contract, we better jump all over this action, because at that point, that clock starts. And before closing, we've got to make sure it's clean. So we'll kind of cover it a little further as we go down. Here's the definition of a cesspool, and I love putting it in here because I've dealt with that. Cesspool, septic tanks without lids, there you go, or other open pits of raw sewage are dangerous and illegal. If you own a cesspool, it's a crime, punishable up to $500 in fines and up to 6 months in jail. It's a schmoo. That's what it is. And the reality is, there are still some here. Another quick war story. Upper Canyon, everybody knows where those $1 million homes are in Upper Canyon. I took on a little listing, a small little property. I said, well, wow, you're pumped to the city. Oh no, we couldn't be in the city. Why? Because it was not part of the original city plat, And they said, we have a septic. I said, you're kidding me. So lo and behold, show me where it is. All I had to do is go walk around the corner of the house, and I knew exactly where it was. And the young woman, his parents had passed on, who was dealing with the estate, it's there. And I said, that's not a septic. That's a cesspool. And right below it, guess what's there? Santa Fe River. Yum. Fortunately, this cesspool was held and no leaching, to our knowledge, or overflow had ever occurred at that house. And the people who were the couple who owned it, the original parents, they would eventually get the pumper out there about, once every 6, 8 months, and he'd pump out the cesspool, no problem. The difference with that is all liquid waste is going right into that. So there isn't a leach field or anything like that. It was all there. It's just a big container. So I said, we got to get this thing taken care of beforehand. Now, the property happened to be less than 1/4 of an acre. Another problem you're going to run into. Well, where's the closest line that we can get it to? I mean, city runs a septic right there. I mean, the waste lines. Problem is this house was below the elevation of the city line. Here's the city line, and here's the house. So that meant that they could have no longer, they had to get themselves what they call an advanced treatment system that would take all the sludge and waste, have it pumped up to the city line so it would reach in the city line. Costly. So going right to it, types of septic tanks systems, there's the conventional or an advanced treatment. So the conventional, like I said, is when you have plenty of property around you. You've got the septic, water flowing in, flowing out. You've got the leach field, all the liquid waste is going out because you have enough land that it's absorbed and it's not next to a well. The advanced treatments come into play when all of a sudden you don't have the land mass or you're off the elevation and you got to pump all the sludge up to the city line. Gets expensive. We tried to get a variance with this one particular property through the neighbor's property. They would not grant us a variance. And just for those of you who live in Santa Fe, our great system on Upper Canyon and Canyon Road, where all those middle $1 million properties are, the actual sewer line runs right next to the city, the Santa Fe River. It actually runs right next to it. And if you think about that valley, that's the lowest point. Great wisdom of our people said, okay, let's just run the sewer line right next to the water lines. And that's where it is. So when you're driving on Upper Canyon, you're hiking up in that area, you're always seeing the city wastewater people walking that line because of potential leaches. Okay. Let's move down. Something else that comes up is how big of a septic do I need? I've got a 3,000 square foot house and it only happens to be maybe a 2-bedroom. It's a suite on one side, suite on the other side, but it's 3,000 square feet. I must need a big septic. No, how it is measured is dependent on the size of the property, number one, the acreage, and actually what they call a dedicated bedroom, a sleeping room. So all of a sudden you may only have a 1,500 square foot house, but it's cut up into 4 bedrooms. That particular house is going to require more size septic than that big one that only has 2 bedrooms. And where they come from is they basically, I think the ratio is 2.5 people can sleep per room. So if you got 4, they say, well, there's potential of 8 people could be sleeping in that house. And that is going to create more waste than a person who only has a 2-bedroom home. Okay. Here it is. Typically, a lot that is 3/4 of acres or greater is basically eligible for a conventional system. So if you got a property that's an acre, you probably can sit no problem with a conventional. Undeveloped lots of less than 3/4 of an acre will likely require the advanced treatment system. Okay, I told you the one that had to do the lift station and pump out, but all the advanced treatment plant is you can still have a leach field, but all the stuff that comes into that thing is ground up. It has like a garbage disposal for sake of conversation, and it grinds up all the waste in there. It liquefies it so you can move it out. There are those kind of systems, very costly. The last one that I talked to a friend of mine who had to put one in cost him $12,000 for that advance. And that didn't include any kind of leach field and so forth. So that too can be a determinant on the size of lot you have and what the building. So there's all these variables. So at the very least, you want to read this information sheet. Almost said the S word. So you're knowledgeable about this, but you also want to give this to your listing people, to your clients. Say, read this. Are you guys a conventional system? Are you a advanced system? 9 times out of 10, they say, I don't know. Well, then it's time that we could get it evaluated. And I agree with Pam that if you're 180 days out, that's really when you want the thing pumped and cleaned and verified by the evaluator, the inspector, if you will. But it also, if your people don't know what kind of septic system they have, don't wait till the last minute. I'm not advising pumping it out, but I would tell you, you need to tell your people, hey, well, let's get somebody out here who can tell us what kind of system you have, because it can be one of those that's going to derail you at the very end when you're ready to close. All right, let's talk about evaluation. Except as noted below, New Mexico Environment Department regulations require that prior to the transfer of a property with an existing system, the seller must have the system evaluated by the New Mexico Environmental Department or a third-party evaluator, depending on whether the system is permitted and if permitted, where the system was permitted. So they've loosened it up a little bit because there are now septic people, and I'm sure you guys have them in Farmington as well, who have now been certified by the state as evaluators. Years ago, it was a bear because the only person that you could call was somebody from the state to come and verify, and you were always trying to coordinate the dates and the times for them to be there. And inevitably, you would get the pumper truck out there and the guy to pump the stuff, and the guy from the state wouldn't show up. And so, it was always a hassle. They have gotten out of the point, and we have some names on our recommended list that, you call the pumper and says, hey, are you licensed to do the evaluation? Good question to ask them. Because if so, then they can go out there and they actually bring all the little documents and so forth to do it. And I'll show you what that looks like. So that also, there's a variance. As Pam mentioned that earlier, let's say that you got into a scenario that you're cutting it too close. You can ask for variances on this as well. Okay. Lastly, the buyer should be aware that once the property is transferred to the buyer becomes responsible to the New Mexico Environment Department for remedying any defects in the system identified by the valuation. So, in practical senses, you definitely want to have your septic inspected, certified before you go to closing in the perfect world. Because if you are pushing that expense on to the seller, then they're going to get the pumper truck out there, they're going to evaluate, and if there's something wrong with the septic, they're going to be the people who are going to fix it before you go to closing. So again, it becomes all that deadline stuff that we talk about. So naturally, if you have a septic system, there's a good possibility you're not going to be able to close the deal in 30 days. You might be get in 45 if you have all your ducks in a row and you have all your inspectors in a row and you have the state of New Mexico in a row. You might get it done in 45 days. Now, it is possible that, let's say, that your seller that you've listed says, oh, I was well aware of it. And guess what? We just finished having our septic pumped and they checked it and we got a certification already. Woo, rock and roll, man. That's the perfect kind of buyer, a seller you want, right? Because you have the documents to prove that it's already been done. But that clean out is only good for 180 days. So if they had done it before you took the listing and it was done 30 days ago, a month ago, well, now that is only good for 150 days. So if you go 151 days, it's got to get repumped. Okay. So just keep those numbers in your head. But the last place that you want to be, if you're on the buyer side of this deal, is the seller saying, well, we can't get it pumped until next week, classic line, but we'll go ahead and pay for it to get it pumped. The buyer says, great, I can do that. You close, the pumper truck shows up a week after the fact, they clean it, they're going to pump it out, they go, oh my God, your holding tank has a major crack in it. Who owns it? The buyer owns it. And you might be able to fight it, litigate it, and everything that they were going to do it, but there's a chance that they can walk away. Greg, question?
So you can't, so you can close without the certification?
You
And
can.
then it's the buyer's responsibility.
Then it becomes, there's that risk.
Okay.
There's always that risk. So you'll always hear me mentor you guys because I've been down this road too many times. I'm not closing that sucker until you have that septic working correctly and is certified. Pam, would you agree with that?
I didn't answer Craig's text in his chat because I didn't want to overstep bounds. Tom, I have closed some with the hold harmless that because the septic people were out and the work couldn't be accomplished prior to closing, that I've closed a couple that says the work will be done within 14 days of transfer because that's the state law. So there's been a couple that we've gone ahead and closed.
Yeah, I have too, Pam, but you just make sure that you have documentation of who's going to be responsible for paying for that. And at the very least, you could also even tie up money in escrow if you know that there's a potential. And let's say it's a conventional system. It's probably no more than 15 grand, maybe. But you
only
15,000. But make sure it's tied up in escrow. And guess what? You'll have your money if everything checks out. If not, guess what? You're going to fix it. Okay. The term third-party evaluator basically means a septic company who has basically gotten licensed by the regulation and license department, just like us, a professional engineer, on-site, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And basically all they are going to be doing is they're going to verify that it's watertight and it's working properly. That's the whole thing. The other one that has bit us a few times here at this office is where it actually is located. The system appears to meet setbacks and clearances that the system meets a lot size requirement. I ran into one when I first took on Cubine of the actual septic leach field, okay, was right on the property line and the neighbor protested because the setback should have been 5 feet over. And he claimed that any of the septic stuff was leaching into his land. It was kind of thin, but we ultimately had to take the one runner off and move it further to the other side to get the deal done. And what it looks like, if you can forgive my fingers here, all it is a manifold So coming out of that drain pipe for the liquid waste, it comes out and it creates just a manifold, perforated little holes. And so when all the liquid goes into those lines, it naturally, slowly leaches great fertilizer, maybe, into the ground. So it isn't like it's hazardous stuff. That's why they do tell people all the time, not only just because of city water, when you have city lines. And so God forbid people don't put anything down that drain, even in the septic, that you go, oh, I don't care. I'll clean my paint bucket here, and you're throwing thinner down the drain, thinking never, really, you're affecting the groundwater. Hence the reason that we're now the police officers for liquid waste. Okay. We're going to go next to, let's see what I got here. Can never get this.
While you're moving on, Tom, I do want to throw in there, guys, if it's permitted, it's cheaper. And it used to be, I think, Tom, doesn't the state have to come out and do the final inspection if it was
Yes.
unpermitted?
Yes. And I'll show you what that looks like, guys, in just a second, on what you should be looking for with your docks. Yep, here we go. What I do? Sometimes I get myself so confused I can't find myself.
And since he's still looking, on a special, what do they call it? Special septic. A lot of times those are on maintenance agreements, and that will be part of the lender requirement, is that they're on a signed maintenance agreement for those raised septics, those special, I can't think of the name, Tom, help me out here.
I wasn't listening, Pam. I was letting you take the show.
Okay, I've got it. But the special septics that are raised, or the soil's too loamy, or it's not loamy enough, when a lot of times those will have a maintenance agreement on them, and the lender will require that they have a year service agreement with the company.
That is correct. Those are the advanced treatment plants. They all are going to require that. Okay. So can you guys all see the contingency form that we're going to fill out? Okay. Addendum number 1, it could be 2 or 3, how many addendums you have. And of course, there's our famous Tom Jones being the owner and or buyer, and Diana Ross being the seller. Okay. And there's the address, lot size, as much information highlighted again. That agreement is contingent upon the buyer's satisfaction with the legal status and physical condition of the on-site liquid waste system and its suitability for the buyer's purpose. The evaluation. New Mexico Environment Department require the seller to have the on-site liquid waste system evaluated prior to transfer. Okay. And the property is the date of the deed transferring the property is recorded. So goes back to that same comment of being careful, because it's basically saying once it's transferred over to the buyer, it now becomes the new owner's problem. So be careful with that. I think most people are pretty legit, but we also deal with people who say it goes back to that for sale by owner one that gets you, they'll bite you. And I also highlighted this. There is no provision in the New Mexico Environmental Development regulations for the buyer to waive the evaluation. So I get that question on occasion when people say, Tom, do we have to get it evaluated? They said they just put it in, it was brand new. Well, we don't have, there's nothing in there that says we can waive it. It has to be done. And why would you want to sell it to a buyer anyway without it being completed? Here's what Pam was talking about a little bit ago. This is that deadline, and it shows it right here. And again, look at the deadlines. Again, keeping in mind, I'm saying this thing was we had a contract. Oh, when did I say it? May 7th, hypothetically. If a new evaluation is being conducted because they can't find one, no later than June 30th. I use that day, 30 days out, more or less. So if you have a date in there, make sure you can get those evaluators out there. That's a real key. Note, per the New Mexico Environmental Development regulations, if a new evaluation is being conducted, it must be conducted within 180 days prior to the transfer of the property. If the evaluation is conducted more than 180 days prior to the transfer of the property, an additional evaluation may be required by NMED prior to the transfer of the property. So there you go. There's that time frame again. So if you're at 181 days, guess what? Your seller's going to be stuck with another cleanout. Two ways of doing this. Seller will order and pay for the evaluation. Again, I put these in as recommending it to you guys. Doesn't mean you can see that the buyer could order it, but it's on the owners. And my strong belief is that seller should be taking care of it. Seller will order and pay for evaluation regardless of who orders and pays for the evaluation. Buyer has the right to select the evaluator. If the evaluator includes the New Mexico Environment Property Transfer Reporting Filing fee, either as part of the septic evaluation or septic charge, then the party paying for the evaluation shall pay the fee. If the evaluation does not include the fee, then the buyer or the seller shall pay the fee. It goes either way. So the only time that I check that buyer is if the evaluation was done, the seller already took it over, the deed has already been recorded, they take it down to the environmental department, it is possible that the buyer may have to spend a small fee. I've yet to see that. They've never charged me here in Santa Fe for a fee for a transfer. Pam, have you ever been charged a fee up there? No. Yeah, they would rather make sure that it's properly recorded with hypothetically a new name and an address. The party ordering the new evaluation shall be responsible for ensuring the evaluator delivers a copy of the evaluation to both parties within 3 days of the evaluation. So give yourself enough time. You know, if we're saying it has to be done by June 30th, man, let's make sure it's done on the 20th or 25th so that the evaluator can give you, here it is, buyer, this is what it looks like, okay? And the same thing with the documents. Here you have the opportunity for objections. Kind of looks familiar, right? Those old waivers and objections. There you go again. The buyer says, hey, man, I want this done by the 20th, and we'll see if we can get it done. And they can resolve it. And I'm saying, okay, we're going to close on the 30th. I put that date in there. Your date may be different, okay? And you're going to have signatures. Okay, let's see if I can pull this stuff up. Here's one that I completed on my dirt farm not long ago. Took the names off. This Shaggy Dog story was, the house was built in 1965. So, of course, we had to deal with lead base for one thing, right? Before 1978. But I was also dealing with a septic that was put in there in 1965. Wow. It was always maintained. It was always pumped. I happen to know that after looking at that house, I knew that the owner of the house who built the house, he built everything overbuilt. So I kept my fingers crossed that his septic was in good shape. Well, looking in the records, there was no document that there was even a septic there. Why? Well, 1965, they didn't require it. So the seller or the family estate went to see to the environmental department. I sent them to go check this out. And they asked that the permit had been granted for the ongoing operation of liquid waste, blah, blah, blah. Mr. Jordan, your septic system has received final approval to operate by the New Mexico Environmental Department. This is a permit for the ongoing operation of the septic system as described in your liquid waste permit application. Please review. So they had to go, let's get a little further down. Let me see if I find this other one, guys. There it is. They went down and basically resubmitted a new form, just as if they would have been putting in another one. And they granted them showing you that last one, that it was okay. But this is basically the form and the evaluation that they went through. You can see there's the guy's name who was the evaluator. He identified himself. There I am, because I was actually out there on the site signing off on it, which I would have much preferred the owner, but they were not around. And here's the entire evaluation. Now, if you get a good septic person, they'll already have all this paperwork to submit. If you don't, you can certainly go online to the environmental department and download this information for your clients or tell them where to go. At the end of the day, you can see that all this stuff was submitted and received, and it was stamped by the environmental department. It was no advance. It was basically one. Here is the actual great identification that they used, a little map. They have a little area to write a map. And at the end of the day, everything was good. It was no public property, was in good shape. Lo and behold, they got it signed off and it was stamped and approved. There's the house. They'll do a little sketch of the house. There you go. Small bedroom upstairs. Boom, boom, boom. So it's a lot of paperwork, but at the very end of the day, so we can do it. They got this permit to operate. And it's sealed, the sealed stamp. A lot of times what you will get is the actual evaluation done. And what you're looking for is that once it's been approved, you will literally have it stamped by the state of New Mexico that they've received it and it's been approved as a workable system. It's not hard. And the first place you start is with that information sheet. Become knowledgeable about it. Go on to the environmental department and do it. And again, I always tell you guys, don't wait till the last minute when you got a listing that says it. Take a little time to learn it now, so that when you have it, you become pretty expert at it. You know, I got pretty good at them. So the reality, it opened up a whole new venue for me, because I was going to Nambe and I was going to Pewaukee, and the septic, which would scare off a lot of other brokers, didn't scare me off because I knew what the state was expecting. But you also have to be real, you have to be realistic and also potentially be firm with your seller and saying, guess what, man, you're not going to sell this house without all this taken care of ahead of time. And God forbid, if you run into one of these things that are an open pit, then you're in trouble. I've used a question here from Cynthia. I've used AAA septic cleaners. I've used Gilbert Chavez septic. And I know that Ted has a few more. Allied is another good one. That, you know, these are the names that you want to give to your client and say, hey, you're going to need this taken care of. Here's some names to call. And it's very simple. And, you know, it goes back and, you know, I'm getting a little jaded guy sitting in this chair. I have to admit to you that I'm paranoid anymore of giving a recommendation or a referral of any of these people, because sometimes it comes back and bites the broker by saying, well, Tom said use Gilbert Chavez. He's great. And then it turns out it blows up on you. So you want to make sure that you are passing on a minimum of 3 names. And you have to make sure that your seller realize that they're part of this transaction, that they just don't turn it all over to you and saying, you deal with it. No different than the inspectors, because it has the potential of a liability coming back at you by saying, well, Cynthia said I should go ahead and use AAA. Okay. And your disclaimer, Cynthia, on that, following your questions here a little bit, is those forms that you have them sign off on. Because those forms are basically putting it in the lap of the seller or the buyer if they're paying for it. But I think in a nutshell, I always push it off back on the seller to say, hey guys, you know, if you want to sell this house, you have a septic. 9 times out of 10, sellers recognize that they have them and they go, yeah, I know I've got to take care of it. I bought this house and boy, I should have paid attention more because I didn't. And then I landed up 2 years later having to put a brand new leach field in. It does happen. Okay. Not too hard. Questions, Pam?
Nope, I think that's good. I think that's good.
Okay. Questions from you guys? Anybody? Who has a septic in the play right now?
I'll go last,
Robert does. And
but I
how?
want to go last.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Robert. Tell me what your situation.
Somebody else first. Anybody else have questions? I don't want to just butt in.
No, go ahead. We're just talking about who's dealing
Okay.
with septic.
Okay, so here's what I'm dealing with. I have a listing that I'm gonna be honest, I'm afraid to take this listing. It's a vacant land listing. The area is an area where there are manufactured homes, and this vacant land listing does not have any manufactured homes on it. And it does have 2 used septic tanks. What do I need to take this listing? They're not active, but the tanks are still there, is what I understand.
Well,
Yeah, so you
Go
have
ahead,
to
Matt.
vote, yeah, if you get, I mean, you can wait until you get a buyer or whatever, because that's probably gonna take some time, and then you're gonna run out of your deadline. But they both have to be inspected according to the environmental department. And if it runs into that, they say, well, we're not gonna use them or anything, then you can bypass the inspection, but they have to be abandoned.
yeah, so you could put a brand new one in.
Yeah,
But,
it's not where they're gonna locate their next house, or they only want one of them. You can bypass it needs to be pumped before they abandon it, but if it's dry. But they can just abandon one and keep the other, or, if they're gonna turn that into something where they want 2 septics, then they have to do 2 separate inspections and double the money.
yeah, good one. And so, depending on the other thing that happens with these septic systems is, remember the leach field. Okay, the leach field is where the liquid waste comes out. So in a case sometimes of these that have been abandoned, it may require you to totally remove the leach field out and redo it, because a lot of times dirt and everything has fallen into these abandoned ones. So there's no way that liquid waste can run through those lines. So it might be to your seller's advantage to at least get somebody to go out and evaluate how they are before they start pumping. Okay.
So you can't just sell them the way they are?
Well, you can, but at the end of the day, somebody's going to say, I want to buy this, and I want the seller to evaluate the leach field and evaluate the tank. I mean, if I was the buyer, I'd say, hey, Robert, yeah, I see that you have these 2 out here. Either that or take them out. I want you to remove them. I'll put my own in.
Okay, well, because and so here's the other part of it. So it's my client owns them on a real estate contract. He's buying them on a real estate contract. Another broker has already told me that they have a client that will buy it on a real estate contract. So it could be like a quick transaction. As soon as the other broker already told me that, let him know when I list them. And so I want to know what I need to have in hand, because it could potentially be something quick. And I want to cross all my T's, dot all my I's, or not mess with it if it's something that I don't want any problems. If that makes any sense.
Well, if you've got a septic system in there, you're going to have a problem, because, somebody is going to say this needs to be cleared by the state engineer, unless they're going to totally abandon them and put it somewhere else. There's that potential, as Pam was saying, that they're not going to use them. But the reality is that you still have waste, if you will, below ground. And I'm not talking in terms of liquid waste, but you've got a tank down there and you've got leach fields down there. So when somebody starts building, they're going to run into that stuff. Who's going to be responsible party if all of a sudden they said, hey, this is where we want to build a new house, or put a new motorhome on it or whatever it may, or a manufactured home on it. And they dig down and boom, all of a sudden they've hit a leach field or they've hit themselves an old tank that's there. Who's going to take care of it? Oh, let's call the broker who sold us that. Find out what he's going to do about it.
Yeah, so don't panic about it,
Right.
Robert, because it is what it is. You got to find out what the buyer's intention is on the property before you can tell your seller what they need to do with the septics. Because, you know, I got so many RV park wannabes around here. If somebody wants to use those septics to develop something, then they're just going to need to be pumped and evaluated. If they only want one, then one's going to need to be abandoned and one's going to need to be pumped and evaluated. So it's just something that you really at this point can't address until you find out what the use of the land's going to be.
But I definitely would be using an adverse material disclosure that your seller fills out. That's, you know, transparency is everything.
There's 2 septic tanks on this property.
Right. Okay. All right. I saw also Miss Kinsey had her hand up. Did you?
I
Rose
did,
Brown.
yeah. I think the first septic system I dealt with was 4 years ago, and it was in El Dorado. And so I was told that I think out there, whoever installed a lot of them, they're concrete and concrete is super porous. So of course, had to tell my sellers that they had to redo it. So it cost them about $8,000 out there. It was AAA Septic, which is a great company. Gina over at AAA is amazing. If you guys ever have questions, or just call her just to see, like, because she is like so knowledgeable. Same with New Mexico Environmental Department. There's a woman there named Dionique, and I have all these phone numbers if you need them. She's amazing. We just put a septic. Well, what did we do for the Vinateria property out in Rivera? I found a really great guy that can inspect, because you're not just pumping, you're inspecting. And then because of this particular property, the water was not hooked up to this cabin. So the septic, there was nothing in there. It's never been used. But there was no permit. And you can go on the NMED website and find the permit. Like my El Dorado property, I couldn't find a permit. It was actually, instead of 34, which was my address, it was whoever the builder put it on 36. So luckily I was able to figure that out, because it's a lot more expensive, a lot more time consuming if you don't have a permit. So my seller, me and Beth had this one. My seller over out there I said, oh, who put in your septic? And he's like, the guy's down the road. And I was like, oh, now we know this is going to be an issue. So it had to be permitted. So my guy out from Las Vegas, he did all that, brought his backhoe out. The New Mexico environmental guy came out from Vegas, and he made sure it needed risers, blah, blah, blah. I don't even think it might've been $7,000, which was a great price for, I don't even know if it was that much, because we didn't need a new tank. I don't remember, but yeah, so it's super important. There's a lot of classes and stuff besides this fabulous one that Tom has. I took one. I have it in my email if you guys ever want to sign up for it. She's really good. It's one of the online ones. But yeah, you should know everything you can about septic. I have another one out in El Rito that she just told me she has a cesspool. So we're dealing. So
Let's get it done in-house.
so she has to put a whole
Again, guys, and thank you, Kinsey, for that remark. This is not the end of your education of what I talk about every Tuesday. This just gives you a little bit of a snapshot, but there are people much more qualified than I am to talk about septics. So when you see a septic class, I highly urge you take it. Same thing with well classes, whatever it may be, easement classes, take them. You're going to have the CEUs anyway. And who knows, you might be sitting right next to me, because I'm always taking those kind of classes because that's what you need to do. But this gives you at least a starting point of going to the New Mexico Environmental Department website, kind of cruising through there and seeing what kind of permits they have. It gives you at least an idea of the forms that you're supposed to use. And, that's what you want to do, is continually Educate, educate, educate yourself. Never stop. In this business, you never stop learning. Okay.
That's why I'm here with Tom today.
We've done it a few times, Pam. So
And I learned something, and you know, I just like bouncing off of you and getting some information that might have passed me by. So I
well,
appreciate it.
as they say, a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. So, you know, that's
Tom?
that. Yeah, Dan.
Sorry, quick one. Regarding renewing your license and classes, you have to have so many electives. Can core electives or the other ones count for that?
Sure. As long as you have an abundance amount, you know,
Yeah,
that-
I took a septic and it's a core elective. I
Sure.
took a septics and well class. Oh, don't take it from, I don't want to tell who the instructor was, but I didn't like it.
Yeah.
But those are core electives.
Right. So my question, just to clarify, was I have to have so many electives.
right.
Can they be core electives?
Yes. Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. You know, you're still going to graduate, you know, and I think if you go on the website, if you haven't pulled the form out, I have a hanging in front of my office, you know, that helps you identify your classes. And so you can do them online right now. I tell that to people right now that, you know, I just got my license renewed at the end of March, right? And I've already got well over 20 some hours since then for my new year. Because I figure, what the heck, I can take, I love these ones that you can do online. And it's, you know, Thursday night, instead of watching Gilligan's Island, I'll spend 2 hours to get my CUs done. Get them done anytime. And that gives you that opportunity when all of a sudden you see, wow, the SFAR has a septic class this week. I'm going to take it, learn it. Okay. Any other $1 million questions?
Yes.
Yeah, Robert.
Has anybody ever ran into a property that had an outhouse? And if so, what are the regulations for that?
If it's an outhouse, you basically have an open cesspool.
Robert, you're not talking about my house, are you?
Yeah, but I didn't want to call you out, man. I'm sorry. This was not the proper venue.
I mean,
Hey,
they're out there,
Tom, that
guys.
kind of brings up, a point. Like I know I've been in homes that I've had friends that actually have inside like sawdust composting toilets
Mhm.
in their home. How does that fall into that? They consider that a cesspool? I mean, how does that work?
They do look at those as advanced treatment plants, because there are some really, up at Hyde Park, when I was the state parks director, we put in one of those because that was the only way that we could utilize having plumbing there, because it's sitting on a rock. There was no way that we were going to connect into having a leach field or anything else. So what that does is it requires that person to have that advanced treatment plant criteria of.
Is there like a
you gotta-
permit or something that they have to
Yeah.
go to the city to get?
No,
or the
you go,
county?
you go to the state to get it. And what
Okay.
it's going to require is just like an advanced plate treatment plant. It's going to say, this is how often we get this thing pumped. This is how, and this is the kind of chemicals we're utilizing in it. All these things are there. So there are some caveats to utilizing. And some of these high-tech stuff, it's pretty good. You know, I know the one that we used at Hyde Memorial Park, if you've ever been up there, is this high recyclable composting system.
Yeah.
But we also had to identify it and also give its work plan to the environmental department of how we were taking care of it. So they're out there. And so, you know, it's GTS, man. You know, I'm sure that.
Well, I mean, we just have a lot of people in Santa Fe. I'm surprised more people don't run into it more often with, they want to, you know, with sustainable living and being completely off the grid, that doesn't come up more often. So
Yeah, and I haven't seen a lot, but that's a fair question and something that we need to ask somebody who has more knowledge about it than me. And that's fair. And going back to Robert's comment about an outhouse, that was very common in northern New Mexico. Hell, I know my ranch in northern New Mexico, hell, we had an outhouse up there, but it was basically an open pit, if you will, down below the toilet line. And that's where it's sat. And the bottom line was, when that area got full, you take a tractor and you cover it up and move a little further down the road. But the truth be said, if you were probably going to sell it, I would basically say that house didn't have a bathroom. End of story. Because that's exactly what I do with the ranch up there where I have property. Hell, my grandparents and my dad and everybody only used that outhouse out there. And when it was done, it was done. You plant a tree there. My God, the tree would be beautiful. All right. Just not a fruit tree. Okay. Enough. All right, guys. I think we probably did about as much damage as we could today. It's always a fun topic to do it. Do not forget, and I really highly, highly, highly encourage everybody. We're not going to be doing my QB Corner next Tuesday because it's the second part to the DocuSign that we're going to do on Tuesday. But next week, if you've been fearful about DocuSign and you haven't really wanted to learn it, and you're taking the easy way out of just staying with DocuSign, with Dotloop or Instinet, I really highly recommend that you get on that class. Ted, what time does it start next week? Do you remember?
I believe it's noon Mountain Time.
Okay. So, get yourself your sandwich ready and your soda pop or whatever you have. And let's take this DocuSign all together and we'll deal with it. Okay.
12 to 1:30 Monday and Tuesday.
Monday and Tuesday. Right.
I'll
Okay.
be there.
All right, guys. Hasta mañana. I'll see you maybe at 3:00. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey, Pam, give me a call when you get a second. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.